Welcome to the Monday, December 15th edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me on Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports. Alongside me every Monday, Jake Letarski. You can follow me at RotoJake, going over the Week 16 waiver wire pickups here. If you're entering the fantasy semifinals, good for you. A bunch of critical injuries, unfortunately, one to our Packers. So Jake and I are going to be a little bit more distraught than we possibly normally are. At least Jake might be. I've been constantly distraught. It feels like the past month now doing this show, but going over some of the waiver wire pickups, a lot of different names that we have mentioned before. We'll try not to spend a whole lot of time. The quarterback position, for example, I wrote CJ Stroud again on my article of like the fourth time this month now, I guess in the last 4 weeks. So we'll try not to repeat a bunch of these names, but it's worth noting just how we kind of prioritize a few of them have emerged, at least from a top waiver wire perspective. And Jake will kick things off here with the Packers, of course, mentioned. We didn't mention, but the Micah Parsons injury just being catastrophic, as is every Wisconsin sports injury that seems to happen to us. Kind of ignoring that part of it. Obviously, the Bears will win next week and probably do so pretty easily. I think Colston Loveland actually is a pretty obvious pickup, and Luther Burden, especially from Odunze, is out as well. Two Bears offense will just completely own the Packers. But Christian Watson also out maybe 5 plays before Micah Parsons, and had to go to the hospital, I guess, as a precaution in Denver.
They let him fly back.
Yeah, Christian Watson's dad said everything's fine. There's been reports, at least right now, saying Watson could be available this week. Color me pessimistic that will actually happen. So I think in most normal leagues, Jayden Reed has already been picked up, but he is a name out there just kind of monitor in case he's available.
Yeah, I mean, if we can move on from the doom and gloom here, that is a good transition to Jayden Reed. I actually threw him at number 1 in my top 5 list. I know there aren't a lot of serious leagues, you like to say, where he's available here, but 41% Yahoo leagues, that's still under our threshold. He tied with for the team lead with 6 targets. He increased his snap share. Last week was his first game back. It was 47%. This week it was 65%. Ran more routes, a couple more looks here. Didn't really have the designed runs, but caught 5 of 6 passes for 55 yards. They're at Chicago and then versus Baltimore, which are, on the season, bottom third against opposing wide receivers. So nothing really overly scary about those matchups. And yeah, we'll see what happens with Christian Watson. You also mentioned Reed came away with an injury at the end of the game. I don't remember seeing that, and we don't have anything official listed, but that's one option. So, I mean, as far as there are a whole lot of guys that we're going to talk about, some new names, but there are a lot of factors that can put these guys completely out of contention for a waiver wire ad if their backfield counterpart practices or something else happens, along those lines. So as far as players you actually pick up, maybe even start, Jayden Reed's actually one of them. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
The CBS reporter on the sidelines had mentioned that in her tweet, just going over all the Packer injuries from that game in that loss to the Broncos. And I had seen that picked up in a few other places, but none of the Packers beat reporters, when I checked this morning, had acknowledged that injury too, which is why we don't have a note out. Packers play Saturday evening against the Bears, so we will have practice information come Tuesday on a lot of these guys. And if you see multiple DMPs from Jayden Reed, I would say Matthew Golden emerges in that same spot, because Golden could do the Christian Watson role. You have Wicks and Dobbs more or less do what Jayden Reed has done. Again, they'll lose to the Bears. You just can't overcome the amount of injuries that the Packers suffered in just one afternoon, but there probably will be offense. And I think in the event that Jayden Reed is out with the injury, Christian Watson's out with the injury, then you might have Matthew Golden become that guy. And he is widely available, even in like our stake league, for example, Jake, he is widely available right now too. So Jayden Reed, Matthew Golden, probably near that top of the list from waiver wire perspective. Then we can kind of go into more of the running backs, and you have Blake Corum listed in here. I guess, again, in any serious league, I don't think Corum is at all anywhere close to being picked up, but I guess we can mention him real quick too.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that in a semi-serious league, I was able to pick him up last week for nothing. He was glossed over. Now, granted, half the teams are eliminated with the playoffs starting. People aren't as active with their transactions. And if you're in a spot, you're fortunate enough to be in a playoff spot or heading into the semis, maybe you really haven't needed or thought about having to pick up someone like Blake Corum. But at only 40% rostered, I'm just going to remind everybody, 14, 26, and 13 PPR points over his last 3 weeks. Tough-ish matchup at Seattle this week, followed by at Atlanta in the championship here. But again, 7 or more carries each week going back to week 7. If you're a Kyren Williams owner, you better have him on the roster. And even then, there's a standalone flex value, basically, just based on the amount of touches he's got. It's still Kyren Williams' backfield. That limits the ceiling. But there are some playoff matchups where I'm going to be struggling for a flex, whether it's Do I trust Devontae Smith after his run of play? Do I, Devontae Adams has to sit this week. Who knows what other injuries are going to pop up over the course of the week here? There are situations where, at least in the shallower leagues, Reed and Corum are both guys you could probably throw in there in the lineups. Of course, Reed might want to check the injury report.
I'll add Michael Carter to the list. Cardinals back. We have talked about him in various different portions of the podcast. The Cardinals backfield been very frustrating. Trey Benson, who had that meniscus tear back in week 5, we were waiting for him to come back. He was officially ruled out as of last week. Did not get activated off the 21-day practice window, so he's done for the year. And then you had Bam Knight, who had been the Cardinals' deferred starter, if you want to use that term, suffer a severe ankle sprain where he's carted off. I guess there wasn't anything more serious than ankle sprain, but pretty conventionally going to be done for the year, I would imagine, for Michael Carter. So now you have Amari DiMercato, again, ironically, the guy that kicked off this thing for us with the Cardinals, and then Michael Carter. And you look at the Cardinals who they play this week, another difficult matchup. I think Michael Carter has a very safe PPR floor. I would rather play Michael Carter than Blake Corum, for example, against that tough Seahawks defense. And I think Michael Carter actually arguably is my top waiver pickup with all the information we have, or frankly don't have as of this recording Monday.
Yeah, well, the big thing is he's at Cincinnati in championship week. So, I don't know if Bam Knight or anything will come back. We'll see what happens with his MRI. But basically, Carter was on the field for 53 snaps, and DiMercato was only out there for 7 snaps. So it was clearly Michael Carter's backfield again with Bam Knight out. Now, 14 carries for 56 yards. It was a tough matchup against the Texans. With those guys limited, he actually caught all 4 of his targets for 38 yards. So, yeah, home against the Falcons, then at Cincinnati. Michael Carter I actually put at number 5 here. But, again, depending on how the dominoes fall this week, he could easily clear that up. I had some non-running backs ranked ahead. I think we have to start with Luther Burden, who I had ranked number 3. We've been talking about him for weeks, right? I don't want to keep beating this dead horse, but the circumstances have once again changed. Romo Dunes gets hurt. He aggravates that stress factor. In
the pregame warm-up, on Sunday. That's right.
Warm-ups, yes. So, again, that's part of the reason why Luther Burden is still down at 17% roster. Yeah. And, going up against the Packers here, I think we're going to have some points scored either way. Luther Burden is interesting. Now, look, we have him with a questionable tag. Of course, he came up with an ankle injury, right? So we'll have to see how that shakes out. Maybe that's why he should move down my rankings, I guess, because of that. But yeah, that's interesting. And then DJ Moore, of course, the other one there. Luther Burden, in terms of snap share and routes, wasn't necessarily great, but he ended up being the one that, produced in that game. He certainly does have that chemistry with Caleb Williams. There's something there for sure. He led the team in targets, basically, caught 6 of his 7 for 84 yards, which is really not a bad stat line considering the Bears were not passing the ball, didn't have to pass the ball in the fourth quarter. They had thoroughly dominated the Browns in that game. That game was never actually close in the second half. So there was no, I imagine – even with the Packer injuries and the whole situation they're going to give him more of a fight than the Browns did, and that there will be situations where, the Bears aren't going to feel comfortable with the 2-score league and they're still going to be pushing it. At least they're going to have to play the whole game, right? So depending on how this shakes out, assuming Adunes is out, then Luther Burden becomes a very interesting option here against the Packers here. So, but again, you have to watch his injury and practice participation throughout the week here.
Yeah, it's a good point. Again, Adunze had been trending towards playing, and then Sunday, pretty much minutes before kickoff, had been announced that he had aggravated the issue with that stress fracture that had him week to week prior to that. He missed the Packers game previously, so Burden becoming the number 2 receiver does pretty well. I also mentioned Colston Loveland in my article. Tight end position, very bleak just overall if you really need to stream guys. I thought Kyle Pitts would be widely available. He's at 83% rostered as of the article, and I wrote it here on Monday. So it's like it's very tough. And again, I don't know theoretically, maybe 4 teams left in the postseason, maybe 6 in a lot of different league formats right now. You ideally have your tight end position figured out, but Loveland might get a little bit more volume in the instance that Dunze is out and maybe Burden is banged up. But Olamide Case has been that slot guy as well too for the Bears offense. And again, the Bears offense is going to go nuclear against the Packers. That's just how it's going to be with how bad that defense now looks with Parsons done for the season and likely next year too. So moving over to Jawhar Jordan, who is the Texans running back now, a guy that I liked a little bit actually in some like deeper best ball league formats. Mario Puig and I, who is the co-host on the SiriusXM show on Friday, do at least one NFFC best ball where you're drafting 30 rounds. And we got into a deep Jawhar Jordan conversation at one point last year in February. So like I'm very familiar with this.
This is not the first time the show has featured Jawhar Jordan. Okay.
Yes, yeah. We've gotten to that sicko level of conversation. Yeah. I will say I'm playing somebody that has Woody Marks next week, so I guarantee Woody Marks will be fine and will go nuclear against me. However, Woody Marks did leave this game relatively early. That game was, it felt like never in questioning yet. You look at the score; it's the Cardinals are kind of hanging around. The junk time production. Jacoby Brissett has been awesome this year. If you've been relying on him, but
a fun stat is Jacoby Brissett scored more fantasy points against the Texans than any other team has scored against the Texans.
Incredible. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I really hate some of the compiling stats. When you're referencing, like, is this quarterback good or whatever else? The most infuriating stat for me is always QB wins, as if that matters for if the quarterback is all-time great or whatever else it is. But it's a secondary conversation. Jawhar Jordan now got the opportunity for Houston again. No Woody Marks. Nick Chubb was already ruled out for that game. Dare Ogunbowale has been traditionally the third down back, but Jawhar Jordan ended up being used pretty heavily. And the Texans have a really good matchup this week. Now, again, we had reports earlier today that Woody Marks had the dreaded could have returned if the game was close thing, Jake. I never, ever, ever want to trust that again this year. I know it's not the Buccaneers telling me that baloney, but
I feel like it's been the case every single week for the last couple of weeks. It was with Achan last week.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's been a recurring theme, and that's just the tough part about doing the show early on Monday afternoon. You know, no practice data to go by, and, you know, we're kind of winging it. And hopefully we've done an okay job setting the table for all the different scenarios here that could happen. But we always figured in the event where Marks was limited or Chubb, of course, missed his first game of the season somehow, we assumed in the event that Dare Ogunbowale would take more of a role. But really, Ogunbowale stayed in his same kind of role. And Jawhar Jordan had 28 snaps compared to 21 for Ogunbowale. And then obviously he busted off that 50-yard run that made the final stat line look a whole lot better here. And then he caught both his targets, too. You know, he ended up getting 2 targets. Ogunbowale had 4 and caught 3 of them for 32. But again, you know, we'll see what happens with both Woody Marks and Nick Chubb. I never got the sense that Chubb was super far away from playing. I thought he had a chance to suit up. So, you know, we'll watch that. But again, this is one of those things where Jawhar Jordan's a fun name to talk about after a 100-yard game in Week 15. But Chubb and Marks return to practice, and especially with the rumors and narrative around Marks this week, having him possibly coming back, then all of a sudden Jawhar Jordan's kind of back in irrelevance if he's even active for the game. So, again, you have to keep an eye out here. But if you are in a super, super deep league and you were relying on Woody Marks, I believe I was in one of the leagues I had a buy-in.
Nice.
I might have to back him up with, you know, a good warm body to fill, like our 14-team Superflex that did so many rounds that we did over the summer. Like, that's one where there just aren't names out there. You know, obviously people like Quorum and Jayden Reed have been rostered all season long, and now we have to go. I mean, even someone like Michael Carter is probably out there in that. So yeah, Jawhar Jordan becomes a name to watch. He makes our list, but circumstances could change heavily before Thursday, even if your league runs on Thursday here. The only other name I had on my list besides those guys was essentially your quarterback stream of choice.
Well, hold on. Let's get back. We'll get to all of the quarterback part of things because we'll wrap in our cover boy, Gardner Minshew again. Patrick Mahomes also suffered an ACL tear. Just a brutal day if you are a Packer or Chief fan here, and I would imagine for various different reasons for each franchise. But Mahomes now done for the season. What does that mean for the pass catching? We had people in the chat asking questions on Rashee Rice, for example. So we'll expand a bit more on the quarterback position here and just overall in its totality because there actually are a few streamers if you are missing Mahomes. But first, I want to get a word from our sponsors here with Playoff Blitz. All right, check this out. If you're like us and hate when your fantasy football season comes to an end, but for the real football gets good, you've got to try out PlayoffBlitz.com. It's fantasy football built for the NFL playoffs. No drafts, no waivers, no sweat. Members just pick up a lineup each week from the playoff teams. You can only use each player once. So once you start a player, you lose him for the rest of the time. That's where the strategy kicks in. Remember, there's no need to hold a draft. Just create a league and invite your friends. Starting a league, it's pretty easy, and it takes less than a minute to go and do. And you're already into the wild card weekend to the Super Bowl. PlayoffBlitz.com is your home for playoff fantasy football. League start at $79. You can invite as many people as you like. Run an office pool. Run an office pool. Invite league mates from your regular fantasy football leagues, or even your grandpa's bingo league if you really want to too. Join today at PlayoffBlitz.com, where fantasy football meets the Super Bowl. Enter promo code ROTOJ ROTOWIRE. That's ROTOWIRE for a discount on your league today. All right, let's get to the cover boy on our YouTube video here, Jake. Gardner Minshew. Alan Tlazowski does a great job putting together all of our different YouTube content. Is a major dynasty guy. That's the only league in which I'd actually recommend Gardner Minshew be a pickup, and often that's very super flex heavy formats as well too. Realistically, I think there's probably a half dozen, if not more, names that I'd rather have over Gardner Minshew, correct? Mm-hmm. Or are you more of the opinion that he is actually a redraft sort of streaming option this week too?
So I kind of took CJ Stroud out of this conversation, fair or not. I mean, if you're not going to allow me to count Reed, Corum, those Loveland, even those 40% roster guys, it's tough to, recommend CJ Stroud, who's 48% rostered. He's home against Las Vegas. That would be my top option. But I kind of threw him out just for the sake of discussion. So for me, it's option A or option B, and they're both very scenario based here. One being obviously Patrick Mahomes is out. Gardner Minshew is up, and I believe they have the Titans this week. I didn't actually write that down, but I think it's the Titans this week, and who are 25th against opposing quarterbacks. They're on the road. Now, maybe this team is deflated a little bit without the playoff hopes. Like, what incentive does Kelsey have to be running out there at 100%, that type of thing? But, Rashee Rice, some of those other guys, like Hollywood and whatnot, have, future outlook contract type things to prove here. So, I'd like to think they're going to go out and be professional athletes and do that. But yes, Gardner Minshew's in the conversation just because it's an Andy Reid offense, just because he'll figure out a way to work him. But my top option actually, and it's situational too, based on tonight, next week is Tua Tagovailoa against the Bengals. And the Bengals, as we know, have no defense whatsoever. And Tua will probably go out and toss 4 touchdowns. The question is here, Miami, I had to look this up beforehand. I assumed that they were just out of playoff contention already. They're 6-7. They're almost out of playoff contention. If they win tonight, though, they're still technically alive. They just need a whole bunch of other really good teams to lose out, which probably won't happen. But the door hasn't been slammed shut on Miami yet. And if they can beat Pittsburgh tonight, which I'm not sure is going to happen, but if they can, then he becomes very interesting if they're still fighting for playoff hopes and are playing a Bengals defense that is, just an automatic 30 burger for opposing quarterbacks all year long. So Tua becomes interesting, but again, that's based on the situation tonight. Thankfully, it's Monday night. You don't necessarily have to make that decision right now, but Tua is interesting. Like I said, Gardner Minshew's okay. I also kind of like Bryce Young at 18%. He's home against Tampa Bay. He's been playing all right lately. He's got Coker back. They're interesting. I'm looking at, but again, CJ Stroud first. Follow it up with Tua if they win tonight, and then maybe Bryce Young, or you jump into Gardner Minshew territory. But I think Gardner Minshew is, it would have to be, super. I think Gardner Minshew is probably limited to super flex.
Dare I say, Jake, I would rather play J.J. McCarthy over Tua as well too. I have recommended Tua on various Waiver articles. We talked about this in past podcasts as well too. He has been incredibly disappointing to me, and I don't trust the Bengals to not do this Jekyll and Hyde thing where the defense actually looks good. I mean, look at Lamar Jackson. He throws for 2 touchdowns, but only 150 passing yards. Outside of Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane, the Dolphins really don't have a whole lot. I actually think the Bengals defense will play fine enough where Tua can be a low-end quarterback 1, more like that quarterback 20 range, whereas McCarthy's been playing really good, gets a really equally juicy matchup against the Giants next week, and I think has an opportunity from a rushing perspective to give you a floor that Tua does not. I would rather play J.J. McCarthy over Tua next week.
Yeah, I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree on that one. Yeah, J.J. McCarthy looked fine, in this matchup. The 2 passing touchdowns and the rushing touchdown helped. But I don't know, Dallas is 32 against opposing quarterbacks. I can't overreact to an okay game against the Commanders and a good game against the Cowboys. Now, granted, McCarthy might have the dream playoff schedule, right? From week 14 on, it was Washington who's 27th against opposing quarterbacks. Dallas is 32. The Giants are 26, and then he gets the Lions who are 29. So I guess if you're looking at a this week and next week scenario, maybe you throw it out there. But I don't know. For this week alone, I would rather play Tua at home than McCarthy on the road is kind of where I'm sitting at this. But that's how I'd rank him. Again, but this is us ranking quarterbacks like 15 and 16 on the week, probably, right?
Yeah.
I don't really see a top 12 guy you're necessarily yanking.
Well, Mahomes, right? I mean, that's
obviously Mahomes is the guy that you would go
part
with,
of it, yeah.
But I mean, if you were rostering Mahomes, it's not like he was having the greatest fantasy season ever. You might have been rotating him with someone else. Might have been. I
The
had a
way that
couple
I would build rosters, I would have a second quarterback, but actually, think Mahomes was like top 6 in fantasy scoring throughout the year, and it had been a little bit up and down. But I mean, there are some people probably that hadn't. Like
maybe it's the volatility. I actually didn't have any Mahomes across 12 leagues this week, so I will admit that I'm maybe a little bit out of touch on that one.
In my Lamar Jackson leagues, I think there's only one that I actually have a backup in as well too, and you could argue Lamar has been significantly worse than Mahomes too. So
Mahomes is number 2 in fantasy scoring. Jeez,
yeah, it's tough. I think
Matthew Stafford's number 3 and Drake May's 4. Wow, that's wild. I actually haven't looked at that in a while, and that's surprising.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who had Mahomes might have been on a bye. So great, like Mahomes played the whole game, so he gave you points anyway. But trying to figure out what to do, it is frustrating. It certainly is frustrating to have these significant injuries happen here in the fantasy playoffs. And I do not think Gardner Minshew is an obvious play. Jim Coventry and I do the weekly rankings every Wednesday here on the RotoWire YouTube channel. That is not on the podcast network. So if you want more of the idea of start sit or what do we do with these Chiefs guys, I think Jim and I will have a bit more information and data present come Wednesday. That's normally at 10:30 in the morning Eastern that we'll go ahead and do that. So tune in with us, Doomsday with us if you want to as well, too, because I probably will still be very angsty at that point. And Jim tries not to show his Bears fandom, but he'll have to do a really hard time fighting me on that on Wednesday's show because I will be annoyed, again, with the Micah Parsons and all the Packer injuries as well, too. That wasn't the only quarterback replacement. I mean, when we did the podcast last week, Monday, we were, I think, obviously not as upset because we aren't Colts fans, but I at least acknowledge just how frustrating the Colts fans would feel with your Daniel Jones quarterback asset now done for the year, possibly next year too, with the Achilles and giving up the 2 first-round picks for Sauce Gardner and not making the postseason potentially. Just as catastrophic as it could get, even more catastrophic than the Packers last 24 hours. And yet, Grandpa Rivers comes in, does okay against the Seahawks, barely pulls out a win. I'm not saying play Phillip Rivers at all. I think Phillip Rivers is quarterback 32 in fantasy, but I was expecting this to look just atrociously bad, and he ended up doing okay, kind of like Joe Flacco when he filled in for the Bengals after only a couple weeks knowing the offense.
I mean, for what it's worth, I wouldn't say quarterback 32 because you got Brady Cook and Kenny Pickett out there, so maybe QB 30 here. But yeah, maybe there were rumblings about it at the show, but we didn't really know about Riley Leonard's health or situation. I mean, when we were talking about this last week, it was Riley Leonard. We didn't think 44-year-old Rivers was going to get signed, let alone start on a short week, and pick up and learn that playbook, out of nowhere. So that was 1-2 quarterback league that came up. Obviously, Brady Cook started for the Jets with Fields and Taylor both ruled out. Geno Smith had shoulder back injuries. Kenny Pickett starts. Even in Superflex, I'm probably playing a wide receiver over those 3 names, if I'm being totally honest, if you're down at that point. But that's some action here. And then the other situation worth monitoring is the Commanders, and Jayden Daniels wasn't cleared for contact as of late last week. He's got that elbow injury. Marcus Mariota actually came out and played pretty well, 10 of 19, 211 yards, a touchdown, carried the ball 10 times for 43 yards. It's still Mariota, but I'd probably actually start him over a receiver in Superflex, provided
Me too.
Provided that that Daniels is out again. I don't know what the Commanders are doing, even flirting around the idea of bringing him back. Now, he's got the Eagles. The Commanders have the Eagles this week. There's some divisional rivalry pride type situation there, but they're number 8 against opposing quarterbacks. I would happily throw out whoever's starting for the Commanders week 17 against the Cowboys here, because not only was that defense horrific when they were in playoff contention, now I believe they're out of playoff contention, and what are they playing for? Teams are gonna shred the Cowboys like they have been all season long. So Mariota's interesting because of that 2-week window, perhaps. But again, doing this Monday afternoon, we don't exactly know what the Commanders have in mind for Jayden Daniels. We'll have to wait and see there.
We'll circle back to the running backs and add the New Orleans backfield into the situation, which makes it a little bit more murky. But if you need a dice roll in deeper leagues, there's probably 2 guys available from that Saints backfield to discuss. First, a word for our sponsors, Prosper Trading. Every weekend, millions are bet on sports hoping to beat the odds. But here's the truth. The house always wins. With trading, you're not betting, you're building. And Prosper Trading Academy will give you the tools, the education, and the live guidance to actually create an edge. You can control your risk, compound your wins, and trade alongside real pros every single day. Stop gambling on games you can't control. Start trading the markets you can. Visit prospertrading.com/ROTO today and take your shot at real financial growth. All right, we mentioned Michael Carter. Again, I think in my mind, Michael Carter is the top waiver wire pickup that is widely available in a lot of leagues. I understand that Jayden Reed and Blake Corum sitting at 40% rostered in Yahoo formats, but Michael Carter now, I would imagine Bam Knight done for the year with a severe ankle sprain that resulted in him getting carted off. Trey Benson's not playing here. James Conner's never coming back. So it's Michael Carter or Amari DeMarcado, and DeMarcado, at least this past week, ended up getting a way less usage share than Michael Carter did.
53 snaps compared to 7 for DeMarcado. That is as lopsided of a backfield distribution as you're going to find anywhere.
And will be the receiving back more crucially over Amari DeMarcado, even if they end up getting more playing time splits working in their favor. So I like Amari DeMarcado. I think he would be, in every sort of league, the guy that I'm going to go ahead and pick up just to block somebody else from getting, because maybe that ends up being a flex play in some deeper formats. Along with, I would imagine, Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt, again, in your shallow league, sitting at 48% rostered. Chris Rodriguez was kind of a late scratch towards the end of the week for the Commanders. Commanders have a pretty good schedule rest of season here, and we could finally see JCM be a bit more of a factor. He was at least last week as well, too, and again, kind of sitting right in that threshold for us.
Yeah, again, I mean, the last couple of weeks I had Crosskey-Merritt on my drop list, to be perfectly honest here. And then, of course, the circumstances here have changed. I didn't see a Chris Rodriguez injury last week. He was the lead back for that team last week and the week before, which meant if you're the lead back in a 3-headed monster and you're not the lead guy, then Crosskey-Merritt could be dropped. But then, of course, Rodriguez ends up with that groin injury, inactive Sunday against the Giants, takes advantage of a good matchup. Crosskey-Merritt returns to be in the lead back there. It's the Eagles this week, followed by the Cowboys in week 17. So I threw it out there, but Crosskey-Merritt's at 48%, and I think that's a lot of people who just weren't paying attention, or are out of it and don't bother dropping someone like that. So that would explain that. But, he warranted a spot on the list just because the circumstances changed a little bit here.
Yeah, and so too does Jawhar Jordan, who we talked about at the top of the show, again, with Nick Chubb out this week. Then you had Woody Marks get injured in the first half. We had reports earlier today that the Texans said that Woody Marks could have returned if the game was more competitive. I just never trust teams anymore with that information. So Jawhar Jordan might be one of those guys that we get more information on really when waivers start picking up Tuesday and Wednesday. Exactly. And then there was a little bit of news, or at least I felt like there was, early in the first half of the Cowboys game. You had Javonte Williams, of course, getting on a Pro Bowl sort of level this year, scores the touchdown off the trick play field goal with Brandon Aubrey, and appeared to injure his shoulder, did not play the entire rest of the first half. I think comes out in the second half because backup Malik Davis suffers a concussion, does not get any pass catching work, barely uses a pass blocker. I think very clearly was favoring that shoulder as well too. I'll be very interested to see what Javonte Williams' stats will be next week. You would think that if he plays the entire second half and runs well, he will be eligible and available to play the following week. But if not, Malik Davis has been basically the Blake Corum for the Cowboys, right? The backup that would immediately fill into volume if Javonte Williams were to get injured or aggravate that shoulder injury further.
Yeah, no, he would warrant a spot here. I mean, all we really know is that it's Jawhar at number 3 for the Texans and Malik Davis is RB2 for the Cowboys. We can't predict the practice report right now, but we know the pecking order. So hopefully that is enough information to prepare you for these situations here that are about to occur. Do you want to talk about the Saints backfield? Because I almost completely disregarded the Saints because, if it's not Kamara and it's not Devin Neal, do I really want a part of Evan Hall or Audric Estime? But then I looked and they played the Jets, who are 30th against opposing backs and even worse over the last couple weeks. So you could roll the dice. I don't feel great about starting any of those options in the playoffs. You'd have to be real hard pressed. There's scenarios there, but do you have a favorite? Because I really don't, and because I don't, I'm probably just going to avoid it.
Yeah, so this is for your Scott Fishbowls. I know in the Stake League I've been playing Chuba Hubbard or Jeremy McNichols for the past 10 weeks now, and I've gotten that wrong every single time.
Yep.
I really believe that if we're able to identify which of the Saints guys will get more volume, this is a running back 2-ish range. To say running back 30 around that spot. And you'd be like, okay, well, Joe, traditionally 4 people left in your fantasy playoffs right now. There's 0 circumstances where I'm playing anyone for the Saints. I mean, that's what you're saying, Jake. I entirely agree. There are deep enough formats where at least I'm thinking about it. And we've watched Audric Estime be the bludgeoner ball carrier guy for the Broncos. And I thought he did that role all right last year. It's just that they invested in RJ Harvey. They signed J.K. Dobbins. There really was no need to have kind of a triple down from that backfield in the case of Estime, and that's why he got cut. And bounced around a little bit on the Saints practice squad, that he was number 5, right? Because you have Kamara, Kendre Miller, Devin Neal, technically Velus Jones has been on the roster. You have Evan Hull that was playing over Audric Estime. That does not speak well to that Estime getting the main ball carry opportunities for the Saints. I think there's a realistic opportunity for both Evan Hull and Estime to be basically a complement to one another in the way that they both want to play. And Hull being the more explosive of the two and probably the pass catcher is interesting, but I mean, I never would have guessed Bam Knight would have fantasy relevance here in Week 15, and he had been kind of a mainstay for a lot of people in deeper leagues too. So I wonder if the Saints backfield's sort of in that same mindset where he could maybe play Hull or maybe play Estime depending on what your scoring settings are.
Yeah, looking into the data a little bit further, Estime was on the field for 3 more snaps. Yes, Hull got 1 more carry, but Hull was not targeted in the passing game. Meanwhile, Estime caught all 3 of his targets for 39 yards. That's
maybe I have the roles reversed then.
I think I'm leading Estime if I'm in the situation. I actually did start Devin Neal in Stake League the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so, and he was fine.
And he was fine. So I think I might go ahead and make a backup bid for Estime there if none of these other options that we have are out there.
It's a bleak spot to be in. Again, it's why we saved it for the very end of the running back section, but I think it warrants just being outside of the quick hitter part of this where we could theoretically, if we get more information, and again, like you're talking about with the Houston Texans backfield, all of this goes away if A, Devin Neal is available, or B, Alvin Kamara is available. I don't know why the Saints, who are in contention for one of the top 5 picks in the draft, are playing Alvin Kamara at all, but if the front office wants to force him out there or he's doing it for the fans, you never know. Kamara's missed the past 3 weeks. I just think if it is all things considering with the information we have, one of Evan Hull, Audric Estime might be fantasy relevant in some deeper formats, which is pretty crazy to say at the running back position. Let's go over to the receivers here, Jake, but first a word from our sponsors, Dabble. Dabble isn't just another DFS app. It's the ultimate social platform where you can connect with other fantasy sports lovers. Dabble lets you win big because you win 5,000 times your money this football season. Starting with Dabble, it's super easy. New users get $25 free when signing up. No deposit necessary. Check out the link in the episode description below to download Dabble now. And let's also get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. Okay, we're back and talking the receiver position. I thought outside of a few obvious names, mentioned Luther Burden at the top, makes a lot of sense here with Roma Dunze evidently aggravating the stress fracture in his foot. He was likely going to return here against the Browns, and then moments before the game kicked off, he was ruled out for the Bears. So Luther Burden becomes the number 2 guy, although Burden got banged up in that game. Maybe it's Olamide Zaccheaus. Whoever it is going to decimate the Packers. We do know that with all the injuries they have dealt with and how bad their defense is now with Micah Parsons gone. And then I did catch this one, thankfully, Jake, on the updated Waiver article on RotoWire. Reminder, guys, we'll do this podcast on Monday. I'm making Waiver updates every single day leading up to Thursday's kickoff. I did mention Troy Franklin as a pickup and possible play this week when we got news that Pat Bryant was probably not playing. The rookie 3rd-round pick for the Broncos had taken over for Franklin as the number 2-ish starter for them, but no Pat Bryant allowed Troy Franklin to have a monster game. Frankly, I can get angry with the Packers defense. Bo Nix was awesome, and I have been a Bo Nix hater for his entire career. He proved me wrong on Sunday. Every one of those throws felt like it was on the money or McKinney would drop. So, credit to Bo Nix and Troy Franklin also in that mix too.
Yeah. It got overshadowed by obviously the bigger storylines that were happening within this game and in other games happening at the same time. But yeah, Bo Nix was excellent, and the whole receiver snap distribution is interesting because little Jordan Humphrey was technically on the field for more snaps. I think Troy Franklin's role was maybe essentially the same, but Denver found itself in that rare situation in which they're really passing, and until they took the lead late in the 4th quarter, they were playing catch up for a lot of that game, and had to continue throwing the ball probably far more than Sean Payton wanted to. So Troy Franklin, we call it the Troy Franklin line. He's at 51% rostered right now, but he was the guy that despite seeing, what was the number here? Lil Jordan had 46 snaps and Troy Franklin had 34. So despite seeing less snaps, Franklin got more targets. It was still Cortland Sutton, of course, leading the way with 10. But Troy Franklin is wide receiver 2 in terms of production over there. Some weeks with wide receiver 1, he's viable on a week-to-week basis. And then just a couple of quick hitters. I don't really like any of these guys, but note that Darius Slayton got 10 targets this week. The only problem is tough matchup against Minnesota. They're the best against opposing wide receivers. Gets a little easier in week 17 against the Raiders. Back all the way back to Thursday Night Football, it looks like everybody remembers Kyle Pitts, but with London out, David Sills had 10 targets. He caught 6 of them for 78. he was, made some big catches on the final drive there that led to Atlanta winning that game. So interesting. Again, don't love it, but the double-digit targets, I feel like I have to note just to throw these names out there, put them into the ether, and see what happens here. And the other name that I, of course, used in DFS this week and got blanked was Andre Iosivas. With T. Higgins out due to a concussion. They were just going to force feed Chase, I guess was the whole strategy of the game, with a little sprinkles to Chase Brown. No Iosivas in that game. But I think, in a slightly different matchup or coverage situation, one of them could he could still, be useful. I don't know if T. Higgins will be ready to come back, given it's his second concussion in 4 weeks. So we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, likely. I would imagine Higgins done for the year. Frankly, now Bengals postseason aspirations out. You don't really rush those people back. At least historically, we have not seen that. So I'd be surprised if Higgins plays. I don't. Iosivas, it stinks. Obviously, from a DFS perspective, I do think better days are going to be ahead. Just by default. I'll mention Matthew Golden again. If Jayden Reed is also banged up and Christian Watson can't play, the Packers will have any chance to win. It's because they win 35-34 against the Bears, and I think Matthew Golden has to be a bigger part. I thought he looked good in the limited work that he had against the Broncos. He had a couple big deep catches. If you could use him on the crossing routes in the way that Jayden Reed is, I really think Matthew Golden can do that, but he's been one of the bigger disappointments, at least from fantasy points this year, so I understand not circling back to that one as well, too.
Yeah, Matthew Golden's certainly interesting, but again, it's totally situational, like seemingly all these plays on the show. I think you almost need Watson and Reed to be out or limited for that to come into play. And even then, Romeo Doubs to me is still wide receiver 1. But I mean, the whole Packers game plan is because of the way that the defense, the situation here is going to be. Their whole game plan is going to be to kill clock and run the ball as much as possible. So, hopefully
if they do that, they're going to lose by 21 is my point, because they won't stop anybody and then they'll just kind of forfeit possession. So I'm hoping that LaFleur will change things, but you're right that he probably won't. And that'll be what happens. You can tell I'm still depressed from the Micah Parsons injury. Yeah. So moving over to the tight end position, I mentioned Colston Loveland in my article. He is rostered in 40% of leagues, likely not one of those guys you can kind of look at. It's just really bleak if you need to replace tight end. And frankly, I don't know why you need to. Even a guy like Travis Kelce, for example, you would imagine a pretty big downgrade with Gardner Minshew as the quarterback. I don't know what I'd like. I think I'd probably play Kelce over Colston Loveland, for example, but Loveland has either 40 yards or a touchdown in 6 of the past 7 games. And again, if no Dunze, possibly no Burden, he becomes a bigger part of that offense for the Bears. And again, Packers defense can be very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are 3 tight ends that are in the higher ownership percentage, but are still in our threshold. I know we've been getting some questions about it in the chat. I put Colston Loveland number 1. I think he's serviceable. Still caught 4 of his 5 targets for 63 against the Browns. And again, that was in a blowout. The Packers have not been great against tight ends, and it's only going to get worse with the big ding of their pass rush there. So Colston Loveland is probably the best streamer this week. Dalton Schultz, again, barely hits our threshold at 49%. I rank him behind Loveland this week. Now, Dalton Schultz has double-digit PPR points, and I think 7 of his last 10. Caught 8 of 9 for 76 and a score this week against Arizona. The JJ threat had another good stat. Dalton Schultz, 20% plus target share in 5 of last 7 games. So Schultz, yes, there are some duds on the game log. Any tight end in this range is going to have them. But just based on the matchup, somehow the Raiders are number 4 against opposing tight ends, which is pretty good.
Interesting.
There's again, sometimes the numbers are just weird. You wouldn't think so. Maybe it's because they're getting blown out and teams are passing less, or maybe it's something about the scheme. But oddly, a tough matchup for opposing tight ends. So I like Loveland a little bit more than Schultz. I know that was the question.
Maybe you're keeping your tight end into block Max Crosby. Like I don't know. Maybe that would be
that could certainly be part of it. And I guess if that's the case, maybe that's the Harrison Bryant role. I guess the tight end 2 for Houston. But those guys are interesting. I also wrote Theo Johnson down, 46% rostered. Jackson Dart likes him. He caught 3 of 4 this week for 72 yards. He's had 4 or more targets every single week since week 4. So he's getting consistent work. Again, there's nothing crazy upside. These guys are just consistent options that could be rostered. And then the one interesting wild card one I threw in there for deeper leagues, that's Colby Parkinson of the Rams. And the reason he is interesting is because, this receiving core is a little bit banged up here. And I know Puka left her due to cramping. He ended up coming back to the game. Devontae Adams, remember they have a short turnaround on Thursday Night Football. Devontae Adams hurt his hamstring and I believe has already been ruled out. So in comes Colby Parkinson, who has scored a touchdown now in 5 of his last 6 weeks, believe it or not. So even when the volume's not high, he's getting red zone looks. And if Devontae Adams is out, Devontae warrants red zone looks as well. So maybe even more for Parkinson. Obviously, Devontae limited in this game. Parkinson comes out and scores twice. And then again, when you talk about weird stats, Seattle's 25th against opposing tight ends on the year. So the Seahawks defense generally solid, but not necessarily against tight ends. So Colby Parkinson's interesting if you need a deep flyer, but I don't really know outside of maybe the Kelsey downgrade. Do you trust him? I don't really know.
You're playing Kyle Pitts over him. You're playing Harold Fannin over Colby Parkinson. I think you're playing Colston Loveland.
One of the Commanders' tight ends broke out with Zach Ertz out. That's a dead situation. Mason Taylor you don't trust in the Jets, but he's been on and off the wire all year.
Yeah, he's been injured too. Would you play Colby Parkinson over Tyler Warren now with the Phillip Rivers downgrade? Because I thought Warren was going to get majorly affected, and he did at least this week.
I'm going to actually have that dilemma in a league where I could go grab Colby Parkinson or get Warren. I think I might be leading Parkinson right now, but that's one of those situations I'll change my mind on 8 times leading up to kickoff in the minutes before here. Phillip Rivers wasn't throwing the ball downfield at all. And Warren did get 6 targets, which is encouraging, but 3 for 19 is not. I'm glad I had a buy in my Tyler Warren league because I think I'm going to have to sort something else out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossing routes for the Josh Downs of the world, which is what you should do against that Seattle defense. It's a quick read and also allow you guys to make things after the catch. Theoretically, as long as the throw is on point, it's not going to be a spot that hurts you either, right? There's no tipped balls if you're just putting it right on you guys, catching it 5 yards. But I think Warren, I figured Warren would get more volume because Rivers would be able to hit that route more easily, and Warren beats such a big body. But if the Colts are going to keep playing offense that way, I almost wonder if Warren is well outside tight end 1 spot. And I think a lot of people like you, Jake, will be not really thinking that through or at least kind of contemplating it. So something to keep in mind. I would rather have Loveland over Warren. I'll tell you that right now, even if Dunze is available. I think I'd rather have Colston Loveland. Parkinson's tough because it's not like when the Rams are scheduling end zone throws to Devontae Adams, it's here's singular coverage, throw it up. Devontae Adams, one of the best in the league. To have Colby Parkinson be the red zone guy and replace Devontae Adams requires a boot action and then having 3 different tight ends go different spots. And is Davis Allen's turn or it's not split out Colby Parkinson.
I'm just saying, at some point you respect the fact that he scored a touchdown in 5 weeks. That's suddenly become significant. They will scheme for him, albeit in other ways, but he is someone that gets looked at in that area. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's where I was just going. It's different ways of the red zone. It's not like Parkinson replaces Adams, but I would agree. If we think the Rams will score, very pivotal game against the Seahawks on Thursday, I would imagine points will be plenty for both teams. Yeah, Parkinson is right there. Is there any streaming defenses that you're considering? We had some success here. Like there was a few leagues where the Eagles were shockingly available. Grabbed those right away against Kenny Pickett. That was great. Jacksonville ended up doing good by the end of it. Cleveland was okay. Chicago was okay against Cleveland, for example. Like, what's your thoughts on the streaming defenses this week?
Yeah, it's pretty situational once again. Obviously, if Brady Cook goes out and starts for the Jets for another game, the Jags were a great play last week. The Saints suddenly become a great play this week because they will be at home against Cook and the Jets. I anticipate several turnovers there. I'm also looking at San Francisco is a 50% rostered. I wouldn't normally pick a road team, but it is Phillip Rivers, who, again, looked okay, almost went on the road and beat the Seahawks. But, again, it's 44-year-old Phillip Rivers here. And I threw on here maybe the Falcons at Arizona, but I don't really love that. For me, it's checking to see if San Fran is available, scooping up the Saints, or going with whoever got you here, for the most part. The only other thing I'll say on team defenses is the Patriots are 47% rostered. Obviously, a lot of teams' managers dropped them this week when they were playing the Bills, and, that turned out to be the right decision. This week is another not great matchup, I believe, but week 17, they're at the Jets. So this might be a situation where you look ahead to the championship or your third place game, grab the Patriots, who have been one of the top scoring defenses in fantasy this year, in a matchup where I don't care if it's Fields or Tyrod Taylor. Yeah, there's slight upgrades over Brady Cook, but it's still the Jets, who are gutted and pretty much done on the season. So maybe it would be worth a roster spot to grab the Patriots this week instead of next week when you might have to bid on against your opposing manager for him. So just a little bit of intel there, I suppose.
All right, well, there you go. That does it for us on the Week 16 edition of the Waiver podcast. Again, you can follow me on Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports. You can follow Jake at RotoJake. We'll be back again around this time next week to hopefully get you all ready for your fantasy championships. But until then, best of luck to your fantasy lineups, and hopefully nobody has any other serious injuries outside of, I guess, more.
I will end on this note. Chris Godwin tore his ACL in Week 15 of last year and was back for Week 1 of this year. Now, was that a good decision by the organization? Maybe, maybe not. But it's possible. These are professional athletes, folks. So whether it's Mahomes, Parsons, whoever you're mourning on this Monday morning.
No. Godwin had the broken ankle. He didn't tear his ACL too, did he?
Are you sure about that?
He had a broken, because it got folded in half in that Falcons game, and it was really gruesome. I thought that was why Godwin never came back. If he got a torn ACL as well, too, that's like the worst possible scenario, I feel like.
Yeah, but miracles can happen here. We're just gonna go with that. I tried to do something encouraging, and then you went and fact checked me, Joe. What the heck?
I'm just depressed, Jake, and that's fine. Yeah. It's okay to just feel screwed over sometimes.
I thought I read that somewhere that it was an ACL that he came back from.
It might have been a different time. This past year, I think it was the ankle injury. Whatever, it's fine. Yeah. We'll come back this next week, and hopefully the Packers defense won't be as atrocious as I think it will, and hopefully all of you guys have made it to the fantasy championship. Thanks everyone for listening.